Hello and welcome. You are watching In Your Interest here on News 9. I am Krishna Kumar, and tonight, after months of diplomatic hope, the chill between Washington and Moscow is back, and this time the cost is global. We are zeroing in on the sanction shockwave. US President Donald Trump's first Ukraine-fueled financial frostbite, slamming Russia's oil titans Rosneft and Lukoil with US Treasury clamps. 2 months after the fleeting thaw in Alaska's icy winds, where Trump and Putin swapped handshakes and half-promises over the Ukraine quagmire, the chill has now returned with a vengeance. The two Russian companies, oil giants of Russia, produce nearly 5% of global oil production. The ice that broke in Alaska just 2 months ago, promising movement on the Russia-Ukraine war, has now refrozen into a deadlock, and the world is now scrambling for answers. The White House, after months of hesitation to keep diplomatic ducts open, finally flipped the sanctions switch. Washington accusing Moscow of bankrolling bombs with barrel bucks, while the EU piles on with its fresh ban on Russia's liquefied natural gas or LNG imports. Washington has warned that either agree to a ceasefire or watch your oil oligarchs wither under asset freezes and trading blacklists that could siphon $20 billion from the Kremlin's war wallet every year.
We're doing, look, these are tremendous sanctions. These are very big. Those are against their two big oil companies, and we hope that they won't be on for long. We hope that the war will be settled. We just answered having to do with the various forms of missiles and everything else that we're looking at, but we don't think that's going to be necessary. We would like to see them just take the line that has been formed over quite a long period of time and go and let's, go home. Last week they had almost 8,000 soldiers killed. Many Russians were killed last week. Many Ukrainians were killed last week. We think it's ridiculous and would like to have it end.
We need a configuration that will eliminate the root causes, establish trustworthy peace in the context of creating a Eurasian and wider security system for all. We see no significant obstacles in continuing the work on coordinating the political framework on Ukrainian settlement, initiated by leaders of Russia and US, and reaching concrete results. We view this step as extremely counterproductive. It sends bad signal in terms of reaching significant negotiation progress on Ukrainian conflict settlement. If current US administration starts to take their predecessors as example, that tried to make Russia abandon its national interests with illegal sanctions, the result will be absolutely the same. It will be a failure for domestic affairs and negative for stability of world economy.
And yet, as the benchmark crude oil prices bounce upwards and markets murmur, this is not the full-throated thunderclap that some hawks hungered for. It's actually a half measure, as it spares banks, big traders and buyer nations like ours. This leaves financial fissures wide enough for Moscow to slither through. Analysts at this stage are not mincing words. They are claiming that it's symbolic saber rattling, not a crippling chokehold. The European Union's LNG lockdown adds bite, sure, but with major oil arteries unscathed, Putin's war machine might merely cough rather than collapse, buying time for more missiles. As global oil prices jitter upwards, the ripple is hitting refineries from Rotterdam to Rajasthan in India, turning what could have been a knockout punch into just a nudge. But there is no doubt that the world is watching on where India's love affair with the cheap Russian crude oil is headed after these sanctions. In the first 4 months of the fiscal year 2025-26, from April to August, our Russian oil imports clocked nearly $20 billion, 19.8 to be precise, and It was a bonanza in the previous financial year with over $50 billion, up from the peaks of 46.5 in the previous year and 31 in the year before. The numbers are drastically different, with a mere 2.5 billion imports in pre-war 2021-22. And that's no accident. It's a deliberate diversification dance amidst Western wags of the finger. Indian refiners, from state behemoths like Indian Oil to private pace setters like Reliance, are huddling in high-stakes huddles. They are weighing the risks of riding the Russian rail when half our imports, led by Reliance's 25-year mega deal with Rosneft, hangs in the haze hazardously. Supply snags loom large for Jamnagar's giant, potentially crippling output and cranking up costs. But don't expect an overnight embargo. Private and public players alike will likely linger on legacy loads, rerouting through unsanctioned Gulf coasts. Markets are murmuring skepticism about Trump's sanction. However, EU's January fuel import ban threatens to torch our refined exports. But what is clear is that India's refinery economics could shift. The big questions we're asking tonight: can India safeguard its supply lines? Will partial sanctions be enough to pressure Russia into ending its war in Ukraine? And to talk about it further, we have Ambassador Deepak Vora, former Indian diplomat, joining us live from New York. We have Vlada Galan, President and Chairman of the Board of International Ukrainian Crisis Fund, live from Georgia in the US, and Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, former Indian Ambassador to WTO, joining us live. We will begin with Ambassador Deepak Vora. Talk to us. This is Trump batting on the front foot, yet with some reluctance, so to speak. How do you see India moving at this juncture?
Well, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be with you on your amazing channel. It is now 10:35 in the morning where I am, in a place called New York. You've probably heard of it. They don't like Donald Trump at all. And I've seen these demonstrations that, Mr. King, go away. This is no longer the time for monarchy. Get away. So there were millions of people who took to the streets. I wasn't able to go for my regular walk because people were protesting, and the cops told me, Mr. Ambassador, go away from here. Don't stay here. We don't know what might happen. Now, you've talked about the sanctions that he has put on two of the world's largest oil companies, Rosneft and the Lukoil. Let me put it to you like this, as far as India is concerned. So something that perhaps the millions of people who are watching the show, some of them might be aware, others might not. During the Soviet period, do you know how much oil we imported from the USSR? Less than half a bottle. We imported no oil from them. After the USSR collapsed and Russia emerged, again our imports were limited. It was only now, after the Ukraine thing, that when we began to get discounted oil, we are the third largest oil importer in the world, that we decided to kick it up. That was a strategic, autonomous decision. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Now, let me put it to you like this. He has sanctioned these guys. He had also sanctioned Naira Energy, which I think is a Rosneft subsidiary and has access to the Indian retail market. They've got around it. They haven't shut down. All right, there have been some difficulty. You know, sir, we have a great technology in India. I don't know if my colleague who I see on the screen is aware. We call it Jugaad. We find a way around all these things, and we'll do it perfectly legally. We're not going to break any law or any international agreement. So what I am seeing...
Fair enough. Let's then ask it off Vlada Galan as well. Now that you're asking other question, I know Vlada Galan, one is what India would do. India would be nimble on its feet for sure. But this is something that has a global implication, isn't it?
Are you asking me or her?
Vlada Galan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Putin started this war, and it is absolutely his war to end. What happened, what you saw was a breakdown and the straw that broke the camel's back with the negotiations coming to Hungary. The Russians going into those negotiations tried to push the envelope just a little bit further. And Trump realized that there was not a lot of reason there. They wanted to come to the table in a very unreasonable manner. So what Trump did is start to really push back. Those talks in Hungary broke down, and Trump realized that just as you had in previous historical examples, even the Soviet Union, it is an economic collapse that would lead to some sort of negotiations. Now, you're not going to have an economic collapse with the beginnings of the sanctions on these two companies. First of all, it's going to take a few weeks for some of these contracts and things to take effect, and for some of this to actually go into full force. So you expect that to take a month in itself. Is this going to hurt India tomorrow? No, it's certainly not. This effect isn't instantaneous. It works over time. What this really is Trump's attempt to say, I'm getting more serious and you need to come to the table with no preset conditions to enter the negotiating table, because Trump understands that this is the best way to get a deal for both sides. And so, is this instantaneous? No. Is it going to affect India tomorrow? No. There's been no explicit ban on Russian crude oil going to India, so there's nothing directed at that specifically. But India has to, of course, be careful because of shipping, insurers that are involved, and that could, trigger financial sanctions if those things get caught in the crosshairs. This could, of course, trigger India having to look for other suppliers, and oil certainly having less favorable terms and oil becoming much more expensive. So certainly will have some effect, but it's not instantaneous.
Okay, it won't be instantaneous, but Ambassador Deepak Vohra, even if it is not instantaneous, it will certainly make India rethink its long-term, diversification of oil sourcing, because the realignment that was done in post the Ukraine war will have to be re-looked at.
All right. I have a question for my colleague who's on the show. And by the way, with a lot of respect, ma'am, you're brilliant. My question is, why is Russia fighting in Ukraine? Do they dislike Zelensky? Do they want to eat Ukrainian food? Do they want the territory? Is it very green? They are fighting because they don't want you to join NATO. It's existential for them. Look at it from the Russian perspective. It's existential for them. If NATO comes to my doorstep, I'm in trouble. And there's one more thing. They've been talking about these long-range missiles. They don't have to be stationed in Ukraine to fire into Russia's heartland. They can be in Poland. They can be in Finland. They can be in Norway. We're talking about 1,500 or 2,000 kilometers. None of these fellows, the Europeans, the so-called NATO, wants to take on Russia directly. None of them. And they are using Ukraine as the bait. Keep fighting to the last Ukraine. So as far as Russia is concerned, it's existential. As far as NATO is concerned, it is not existential. If Ukraine disappears tomorrow, will the European Union collapse? No, it won't. They will carry on. Ukraine is not even a member of the European Union. Ma'am, there is one thing, and I've been 52 years in diplomacy and counting. I'm 74 years young. Forgive me, I've seen this through my career. There's one thing called reality. There's another thing called fantasy. And fantasy can never be a replacement for reality. So let me put it to you, sir, bluntly. Hardeep Singh Puri, our minister, had announced in January that we have adequate stocks. We'll manage this. It's going to take some time, but we will manage. We are already forging new partnerships, etc., etc. Take it from me, sir. We are going to overcome this. And Mr. Trump will withdraw the sanctions quickly.
Okay, fair enough. Dr. Jayan Dasgupta, former Indian ambassador to WTO, is with us on the broadcast as well. Dr. Jayan Dasgupta, thank you for being with us. Talk to us. Do you expect these sanctions to be rolled back by Trump? And more importantly, India will surely be looking at alternative sources of oil from the Middle East and Africa.
I don't think really India is wedded to buying from Russia at whatever price. So it is a question of keeping our national interest in mind all the time and striking the best bargain. So whosoever sells oil to us on the best terms, we will buy from them. That is point number one. And we are constantly diversifying. I think as we speak, the negotiations are on with the US also to buy more oil and gas from the US. And of course, the Middle East is next door to us. So we always have the option to buy more from the Middle East. So we will keep our options open and buy. As far as rolling back of the sanctions is concerned, I don't think the Russians are going to be hit very badly by the sanctions. It is going to affect them, but not very badly to my mind. So I think this rollback may or may not take place, but the Russians are not going to, I think, call for a ceasefire based on these sanctions.
Vlada Galan, that's the other question, isn't it? Are these measures, is this the latest sanction by Trump going to be effective enough in terms of the means he's looking to achieve, the end that he's looking to achieve with these means?
The truth is, this is very, very simple. Donald Trump wants to bring Putin to the negotiating table with no preconceived conditions going into those negotiations, and certainly not unreasonable and aggressive terms. Ukraine giving up 30% of its territory is a non-starter, I think, even for the Trump administration. And so what is the goal of this? The ultimate goal? It's to bring Putin to the negotiating table. When Putin shows that he's willing to come to the table and negotiate, and these talks stop breaking down, and we see what happened with the Hungary talks breaking down, then you are going to see that Trump is going to be very willing to work together and roll back some of these sanctions. This is simply a move to get him to the table. And, we mentioned earlier, we had the ambassador mention earlier, the NATO debate. Well, NATO was formed in 1949. My family was kicked off of their land in the 1800s in Vinnytsia Oblast of Ukraine. And so this debate goes far back. And this is not a recent fight. NATO is only the most recent argument. Other arguments include protecting Russian speakers. I'm a Russian speaker. I learned Russian in school. I come from a Russian-speaking city of Odessa, which was Russian-speaking for years. These are all simply Russian excuses and Russian talking points. But my family was kicked off of their land in the 1800s. So nothing has really changed in the sense that, they've always wished the conquest of keeping Ukraine under their control, controlling Ukrainian land. And NATO is just the most recent argument.
NATO is the most recent argument, but Dr. Jayandas Gupta, we're discussing, at this stage about how India will respond, what will India do, how much it will impact India. But, whatever India does, it will have to keep a watch on how this impacts the world as such, isn't it? Because the ripples are going to be felt all across Europe as well.
Yeah, that is true. As far as India is concerned, I think Rosneft will, which has 49% stake in Nayara, their supplies will possibly get hurt. And there may be, if the EU is serious about its sanctions, which now it has been advanced, I think, to January 2027, it may find it difficult to sell the oil which is refined from Russian crude. So that is one part. But as far as India's economy is concerned, we will buy from some other place if we can't buy Russian oil. So that option is always available. And just reverting to the point that our esteemed colleague, the lady has made, I think this is of the essence. It is not only about the land which, Russia has occupied in Ukraine. It is about getting a firm commitment that the Ukrainians will not become part of NATO. They can become part of the European Union, but not part of NATO. I think that is of the essence, and I support the point made by Ambassador Deepak Vora on this.
Okay, Ambassador Deepak Vora, then let's bring you into the conversation. This is a very specific situation that requires very specific answers, and these kind of generic sanctions ain't going to do the trick. My question here is that how do you see Putin responding to it? You just after the talks, the summit, expected summit was cancelled. You saw him doing nuclear training exercises right after that, and now you have Trump again hitting back with sanctions. So clearly, Putin is due one for a reaction.
There are over 100 sanctions, I believe, that have been imposed on Russia. The only thing that Donald Trump hasn't sanctioned is the sun. Why are you shining on Russia? So I'm going to sanction you also. There can't be sunlight on Russia. And this is, I find this funny, sir. This was told to me this morning by one of my morning walkers, a former American ambassador. He said if this guy had the power, he would sanction even the stars and everything. No, the reality here is that Russia is going to overcome these sanctions. One of the things that I know about Russia, I've served in the Soviet space in many countries as your ambassador, in the post-Soviet space. One of the things that unites Russians is a perceived threat to their existence. Take it from me, sir. Ma'am, please forgive me if I'm sounding harsh, but whether it was Napoleon or it was that Charles fellow of Sweden or it was a character called, you might have heard his name, Adolf Hitler, nothing unites the Russians like a perceived threat to their existence. And this is what they perceive today from NATO. Therefore, Mr. Trump's sanctions will only harden their resolve. Putin is no player who was born yesterday. I'm 74. I don't know how old he must be, about my age. And this guy knows how to run the world, man. He's a former spy master. He knows it. My own feelings, sir, if you're asking me what next is, for a few weeks, there's going to be nothing. There'll be some frenetic parleys behind the scenes, and then Trump will say, all right, let's have a meeting or let's have a phone call or something. All right, we've agreed that we have disagreed. Thank you very much. And therefore, there'll be no further movement. I sympathize with you, ma'am. I understand where you come from. I come from a broken country too. I understand what is happening, but it's not going to work, ma'am. I don't think Russia is going to succumb at all, not to this character.
Lada Galang, you want to respond to that?
What the goal of these sanctions is to bring Putin to the talks again. And I think you are going to see Putin come to the talks again because he doesn't like the optics of the way this looks. It's an ego thing. And if we know anything about Vladimir Putin, he likes to save face and he needs to be given an exit ramp. So I do think that the goal is going to be achieved in the sense that they will sit down for talks again. I think that is going to happen. He doesn't want to lose Trump. So I think that we're going to see him kind of come back to the negotiating table for sure. And in fact, I have it from sources inside of the U.S. government that they are trying to follow up on calls to bring back those talks. And that is fresh information from this morning. Now, going back to NATO, I completely agree that Ukraine needs to put NATO off the table right now. That does not need to be on the table. Ukraine does not need to be talking about joining NATO going into these talks. There is no need for that. I think that is just noise and distraction for Ukraine at this moment, and Russia's not going to budge on that. That's just, one of their hard sticking and talking points that they want to stick to, and Ukraine needs to take that off the table. So I don't disagree, certainly do not disagree there.
Okay, that is off the table for sure. But Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, if and when those talks do happen, according to the latest information that Vlada Galan has just given us, those talks will also mean that there'll be, impact on trade across the world because, these two powers agreeing for a compromise will again, result in global trade realignment.
Yes, of course, then if there is a ceasefire, I think Ukraine again will start exporting a large quantity of cereals, mainly wheat, maize, etc. And then the prices for these commodities will ease in the global market. So that is one thing. And there would, of course, be a lot of other spin-offs if there is indeed a ceasefire. But I think Putin, as the lady has mentioned, may come back to the table. But will he concede on his core points? No. I don't think so.
Okay.
My question, sir, if I may interrupt.
Please go ahead.
Why has Trump called off? Sir, I just wanted to ask both our colleagues, why has Trump called off the talks within a week of saying that he was going to Hungary? Is it something the Russians said or did? I'd like to be enlightened. I don't know. Or did he wake up one morning and said, I don't like Putin. I'm going to talk to him. What was the provocation for calling off the talks? Or is it because Zelensky hates Viktor Orban and Orban hates Zelensky? They've been abusing and cursing each other now for months. What is it? Why did he call them off? Perhaps, Ambassador, you may have a clearer opinion about this, a clearer idea about this.
Sir, I am as much in the dark as you are, but my guess is that he would have realized that he was not getting anywhere with President Putin. So he said that better to call it off and try some of the old arm-twisting tactics to see if President Putin budges.
Okay, Lara, your take?
I have it on pretty good authority from some of the sources that I've spoken to in the U.S. government that a call took place. And on that call, the tone very much changed from the Russian side prior to what they were saying previously. This was not a head of state to head of state call. It was a lower level call. And on that call, when the tone turned a bit nasty and a bit rude to the U.S. side, Trump at that point was elevated to the president, who made an executive decision not to move forward with these talks because they thought that they would get nowhere with the rhetoric that was coming through on the other side after the initial Putin and Trump call. And so hence why the talks were called off, hence why Trump's frustration, hence why the sanctions order on these two companies came through. And it was a way to show Russia that we didn't appreciate this and the way that this call went in these unrealistic terms. It's not what you agreed to. So just to put it clearly, they had an agreement of how they were going to go into the talks. Russia changed their position on a follow-up call, and they did not want to proceed with the talks with the change in position. That's this information that I had received.
Okay, fair enough. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, I had to ask you this as far as specifically as India's largest company is concerned, Reliance, which has a 25-year-long deal with Rosneft. Clearly, there will be serious discussions within Reliance as to to chart the way forward from here on.
I think from what I have read, Reliance had been promised that they would get about 500,000 barrels per day for the next 10 years. It could be for a longer period. But I think Reliance is also, very swift in taking decisions and in making mid-course corrections. So if the Russian oil is not available, or if they can't sell their refined product to their usual customers, they will make a strategic decision to buy from elsewhere. It is not as if they are going to be hamstrung by this decision alone.
Okay, so for now, it looks like the coast is clear, isn't it, Ambassador Deepak Vora? But the long-term play will depend a lot on if and when that all-important Putin-Trump summit happens, and how India chooses to play its pieces from there on.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we've been doing all along. I don't think this summit is totally off the table. They're going to meet. Trump will change his mind and say, I love Putin. He said so. I saw him in a press conference about an hour ago saying during my first term, I love the guy. What happened to him? And Putin probably said, what happened to you, Mr. President? It's not just what happened to me. So it's fascinating to see this game, as you rightly put it, the chessboard that is being played. My own assessment, Russia's foreign exchange reserves are about $750 billion, of which 250 have been frozen by the Western nations. So about 500 they have with them, which is about 750 is about the same that we have. He's not going to give in easily, sir. The Russians will come around, they'll gather around Putin and say, Mr. President, go thrash these guys. And he will do it. He's not going to give up on Ukraine. Take it from me. We can pray and wish all we want. I can go to the cathedral on Fifth Avenue and say, please let there be peace, and say all these nice things. It's not coming. The real world is very different from the world we wish we lived in.
Fair enough. On that philosophical note, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up this conversation. We're completely out of time over here. Ambassador Deepak Vora, former Indian diplomat, joining us live from New York in the US. Thank you for being with us. Vlada Galan, President and Chairman of the Board of International Ukrainian Crisis Fund, joining us live from Georgia in the US. Thank you for being with us. And Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, former Indian ambassador to WTO, joining us on the show as well. Thank you, all of you, for being with us here. And with that, it's a wrap here on this edition of In Your Interest. Thank you for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.
इंडियन ऑयल स्वागत पेट्रोल पंप, क्योंकि स्वागत है हैप्पी जर्नी की रेसिपी।
Look, this investment guru tips will double your money. Just claim the offer.